All right, let's get started. Good morning, everybody. We hope that you are doing well this morning. Thanks for joining us for creating a sense of belonging for teachers returning to school. We'll kick it off with some introductions. Megan, you want to introduce yourself first?
Yeah. Hello, everybody. My name is Megan Campion. I'm an associate partner at Education Elements. Most of my career has been in education. I spent most of my time in schools in middle school, teaching social studies, and then I was an administrator in middle school as well. And I'm very excited to be having this conversation with you today because I feel very strongly about a sense of belonging for teachers in schools.
And I'm Maria Morrison. I started out as a sixth grade teacher, and then I taught sixth grade for a while. My last year, I taught eighth grade. And then I was an instructional coach with a nonprofit here in Los Angeles for 4 years, coaching around blended learning. So I worked really in the area of teacher support. Now at Education Elements, I'm a design principal, and I do a lot of our work with leadership development as well as personalized learning. And I'm really excited to be here today. And we have a third person who's not on this webinar, but she co-authored the blog post with us, and that is the wonderful Lauren. So we're sad Lauren couldn't join us, but she's lovely. Quick things about Zoom. So we'll be using the Zoom chat throughout the webinar. You are a participant, so you're not going to be able to unmute. So we don't have to worry about that, but we will ask you to engage with the chat. If when I share my screen, yours gets huge and takes up the whole screen and you don't want that, you can hit the escape key and it will shrink it back down into a pop-up window. So if you're trying to navigate to another window, just hit escape and it will shrink it back to a more manageable size. And the chat should be in the bottom part of your screen. So let's test it out. We're gonna do a little check-in via the chat. If you wouldn't mind dropping your name, your role, and then what is one thing that you are hoping to take away from this webinar today into the chat. And you do want to make sure it's set to all panelists and attendees. Otherwise, you're just sending your messages to me and Megan, which we love to read them, but so does everybody else. So we'll pause for a sec and let y'all start checking in via the chat. Your name, your role, what's one thing you hope to take away from today? And they're still coming in. Thank you everyone for responding. It's also interesting, we didn't say to do this, but to see where people are from. Looks like we have a lot of teachers and also a lot of folks who support teachers in some way or another. So that's awesome. We're excited that you're here. And thank you again for joining us. So to kick it off, we are going to use a Menti. If you've never used Menti, it's a free tool. It's available online. I really love it because it is anonymous check-ins. So when we think about creating an environment in which people feel safe to share, it's a trusting environment, this can really help out because the answers are anonymous. So there's two ways to do this. You can go to www.menti.com in your internet browser, and it will ask you to please enter the code 3407893. Or you can grab your phone, open your phone's camera, and just scan the QR code that you see on the screen. That's the easier way to do it, which is another reason that I love this platform, is it already gives you a QR code. And I'm going to drop the link to the Menti into the chat right now, so you can just click on that link if you want. And it's going to create a word cloud for the prompt. What words come to mind when you think of belonging? So it's already starting to populate. I'm going to play some music. If you have any questions, if you're getting stuck, just drop them in the chat. We're watching the chat, but we'll let this populate for a minute or so. And all right, I'm gonna switch my screen so that you can see the word cloud. You can probably see it on your own device, but we'll share it here as well. So you can see that the words that are being entered more frequently are bigger and more toward the center. So safe, community, safety, trust, um, included, and the biggest one is family. That when you think of belonging, you think of family. And you can see that as people are adding to this, it continues to adjust in real time. And down here in the bottom, I can see how many answers have been submitted as well. Wow, family is getting even bigger and bigger. Yes, long live Selena. I like all the Selena love in the chat. Awesome. So we wanted to start with this just to kind of ground us in not what does belonging mean, but what does belonging feel like, right? What does it mean when we feel like we really belong somewhere? It means that we feel included, that there's a sense of safety, that there's trust, and that we feel like the family, right? We belong with our family, or we feel like maybe the people that we belong to are a family, even if they're not our traditional family. Megan, do you want to chime in about this at all? I put you on the spot, sorry.
I think this aligns pretty closely with a lot of the things that we all think about when we think about belonging, and the things that we'll be talking about today. I think they map pretty closely to the words that we see here in the word cloud.
So thank you everyone for taking the time to do that. Again, that tool is free. It's called Menti or a Mentimeter. I love it just to start check-ins, especially as people are coming back to school. Things might be a little bit unfamiliar. It's a great way to gather some anonymous data and kick things off. So we're Education Elements. We are an education consulting firm. We've worked with over 1,000 schools and districts, and we've been around for over 10 years. Megan, can I toss to you for this one? You explain it really well.
Yeah, this is a graph that we put together for our annual report last year that shows all the different ways that we work with schools and districts. And you can see at the very center of our little snail shell there, it is classrooms. It's the student experience that we started with, and that's kind of the center of what we do. But we have realized that after doing work with teachers on shifting their pedagogical practices to more student-centered models, that there's sort of an inclusion and a participation that's suggested in that, like an active participation from students, that we discovered, you need this similar culture in how you're working with teachers, and in how you're working with your administrative teams, and in how the organization is structured, and so that everybody can sort of bring their best selves to work and offer their highest contributions. So we started with personalized learning in student-centered classrooms. And then we have also been working with districts on responsive and innovative leadership, responsive teams. There's a few books that we use for this, but the through line through all of it is responsive practices that enable everybody to sort of bring their best selves to their experience at school.
Thanks, Megan. Mm-hmm. And today we'll be following this format, the CPAD method. So we'll start with a spark, and then we'll move into expand, which is kind of where we build on content. We'll give you some time to practice and plan. Apply and debrief will both happen on your own in the real world. So today we'll get through spark, expand, and practice, and then you will continue on with apply and debrief. Hi, Vivian, thanks for joining. All right, so our spark. Megan, did you want to start our spark?
Sure. When we were getting ready to write this blog post, we were thinking, like, what is the most essential thing that we know about life since, March 11th, which I think March 11th is like the day when they shut down the NBA and Tom Hanks said he had COVID, and it's when everything started to shift around. And we thought, okay, number one, we've all been through something major. And some of us may have had experience working in, trauma-informed practices before this. And when we did, we thought of a certain segment of our population that would most directly impact. But now everybody's been through something. Everybody's been through something that's really foundation shaking, and we're still in it. So we've had enough time to identify, like, woof, that was awful. Oh, wait, it's not over yet. And we know we're still in the midst of it. And it is something that we cannot rely on the things we're used to relying on to get us through times like this. Like I was talking with one district leader probably sometime in maybe May or June, and it was his state was just beginning to spike. And he was saying the thing that he's missing is the mourning rituals. If you know that something happened to somebody, they used to rely really heavily on those rituals of like, oh, we're going to bring you a casserole and we'll go to the wake and we'll do all the things to show the support for the people who've been through something that you know to do. And those aren't easily available to us now because of the things we have to do to stay safe while we're going through this. So we wanted just to acknowledge those three truths as we sort of set up what we want to talk about today.
And that leads us to what we need to experience during a crisis or during a time of trauma. So we're all going through this collective trauma, and what people need to feel is safety, connectedness, and hope. And a lot of that, just like what we tell teachers, and when I was a teacher, what we prioritized is through relationships, and building and maintaining strong relationships with the people and the kids that we work with, to help provide as much as possible those feelings of safety, connectedness, and hope. And this is from a source called A Trauma-Informed Approach to Teaching Through Coronavirus, which is also a great read and resource. And that kind of takes us into where we are now, right? When I pulled these headlines, just kind of searching for what headlines are in the news right now, and there's a lot of uncertainty, and that is being echoed back to us, I think, in a lot of what we're seeing, hearing, reading, and talking to people about. Like when you look at what the words that are in these are, virtual learning will be better, right? Get ready for a teacher shortage, uncertainty. Like these are not even pretending to be remotely positive headlines. It's really capitalizing on that this is going to be hard, times are uncertain. That is what people are feeling. And we know that, and that is why this is urgent and why you all are here today as well. So we're going to move from our spark into our expand and expand a little bit on what we wrote about in the blog. So I will kick it over to Megan.
Yeah, thank you. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is resilience. And I know there is a lot of conversation about resilience. I don't know if it's a more prevalent conversation now than it used to be. I remember thinking about this when I had children, like what do they have to have when they leave me? And I thought they have to be resilient. They have to be able to take things and move on. Then as their childhoods had moments of crisis, I was like, oh, I didn't realize they had to go through things to get resilient. But you have to go through things to get resilient. And that is one thing I think we can all look toward as something that we will emerge from this with more resilience than we maybe came into it. Elena Aguilar has done a lot of work around building resilience on school teams and coaching teachers on how to strengthen their own sense of resilience. So we wanted to rely on her definition of resilience here. And it's excerpted on this slide. It's resilience is when you experience a challenge or a setback and you come out stronger than you were before, having learned something new. When we're thinking about resilience, one of the things, if you reflect back on something that happened in your life, an unexpected setback or a challenge or an illness, a job loss, anything like that, you do go through it, and you have been through hard things. And this is one of the things that Elena Aguilar says is you've been through hard things before, so you will get through hard things again, and you will emerge stronger because of it. It's hard to see that in the moment, but that is what we know about how resilience gets built. We're wanted to focus on resilience largely because it is how anybody's going to get through this, but also it's how schools are going to get through this. there are estimates. We've been watching these numbers pretty closely since the spring. And we've talked to different people and heard different statistics. And the most recent one is from a survey, the NEA survey, saying that 28% of teachers said that COVID-19 has made them more likely to retire early or leave the profession. We've also heard that in different state teams that we've worked on, that the applications for early retirement are sort of unprecedented and up in numbers. So strengthening resilience and a focus on resilience isn't going to address all of the reasons that teachers may be leaving the profession, especially this year, but it might help those people who are on the fringe. One of the things that I've noticed as sort of a trend line since from the spring distance learning into the return to school now is the total whiplash that teachers have experienced from being lionized in the spring as, you know, heroes who knew how to teach kids while parents were appreciating that since they had to do it at home, to now being sort of more vilified because of their concerns of returning to school. So that sense of vilification, that can make somebody who may have loved the job and may have wanted to stay, it can make them more likely to leave. So focusing on resilience and a sense of belonging may make the difference for those people who are sort of on the edge, loving the work, but not loving the environment right now. We all know, oh, sorry, I wanted to say one more thing here. Teachers know more than most people about the importance of creating a growth mindset environment for students. They know that if they can get students feeling connected and get students feeling like they've got a place and that they can get through things, that students will do better. So offering that same support to teachers is important because they know it exists and they know it's important, and they'll notice when they're not getting it. So we have a strategy here, and this is just sort of a framework for reflection. It's also a framework for conversations with teachers and with anybody that you know is going through something really difficult. Lauren shared this, and she wrote a blog post about this, and I think she linked to it in this slide. She had a personal crisis, and the epiphany that she came out of that with, like one of the ways that she got through the personal crisis was to allow space for herself to really analyze what was going on and how she was experiencing it. So the framework that she used for this and that she shared out on her blog post is using these questions of what's left, what's lost, and what's possible to structure your thinking and to really think in a really intentional way about how you can answer those questions in your new circumstance. I don't know if any of you have experienced sending children to college in this new environment. My daughter graduated from high school last spring, and we've had this conversation so many times, more or less, that, you know, she had a whole vision of her high school experience that wasn't. And now she had a whole vision of her return to college, or her first year in college experience that is not. And so it's culling through and finding out, like, okay, but what do you have? And let's mourn what you lost. But then let's start to think about, like, what might you have because of this that you wouldn't have otherwise had? Another strategy that you can consider while you're putting together schedules for your staff and your teachers is finding time for people to connect and co-create together. For a lot of people, myself included, my colleagues are a big reason why I love my job, and the remote nature of most work right now, and the fact that even if I did return to, I mean, I don't know when I will return to a school building, but if I were in a school building and I were returning to a school building, there will still not be that same ease of interaction that I would have had, say, last year this time with people. So finding a way to protect community time with your community can help fill a void that people will notice is lost in this new reality.
I've noticed, I want to add on to this, I've noticed that one thing that I really miss is just being able to kind of talk about nothing with people, those small interactions that I thought when I had to do them all the time that they were draining, but now that they're not happening, I realize that I actually really miss them because it's just me at home talking to my partner and we're together 24 hours of the day. And I really miss those small interactions, and it feels like when I can get that sense of just kind of talking with somebody, not about anything really important, it feels to me really fulfilling. And I think that that's something that we can create intentionally to kind of fill that space. Thanks, Megan. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you said that. And I actually, since you said that, I didn't put this in one of the strategies later when we're talking about connectedness, but I'll mention it here, that we have definitely noticed that lack of like bumping into people and being able to just sort of like, oh, are you grabbing lunch? Okay, let's just go together and we can take a walk and just catch up. And so for some of us, we've booked time to say like, I'm going to be eating lunch and just, you know, with my Zoom on. So if you want to come and just chit chat while I eat lunch, that would be great. So just trying to create those moments that we could take for granted before. I also wanted to talk about well, we have a wonderful quote by Brene Brown, but I'm also going to throw in a little Churchill here. You can't selectively feel. If you're blocking the bad, you're also not allowing yourself to feel the good. That's a quote by Brene Brown, which is meant to turn our attention to like, let's be real and let's recognize the things that are wins and losses. Like, let's not pretend things are wonderful when they're not wonderful. Let's allow space for things to be experienced in their entirety. And my Churchillian quote that I want to throw in here is, through a time of medical crisis in my own family, I was reading like Winston Churchill quotes got me through every day. And one of the ones that I just love and I return to again and again is, when you're going through hell, just keep going. Like, acknowledge it's hell, but you just keep going through it. And I'm sure you've all heard that before, but I don't know, it speaks to me. So taking the time to celebrate the wins and allow for space to feel the losses is an important way of building resilience with your team.
We're going to shift into thinking about trust. And I just confirmed with Leslie that the slides will be available to you all tomorrow. So if there's something that you want to go back to, or you want to pull something to share with your team, those will be available to you tomorrow. So we'll shift a little bit and think about trust. And I really wanted to frame this on psychological safety. So the shared belief that your team is safe for risk taking. And it depends a lot on context, and it also depends a lot on the power structures within a team, but ultimately comes down to trust, right? If I trust that I can take a risk, I can say something that feels a little bit like a risk, and I'm not going to be shut down or reprimanded by my manager or by whoever is kind of supervising me, then I'm much more likely to do that. And it all comes down to trust. So even though there's a power dynamic there, with trust, we can build that sense of belonging where people feel like they can do that. And I see, oh yes, Brene Brown too. Folks are using the chat. Please continue to use the chat as well. If you have a reaction, if you have a question, just drop it in the chat. And two wonderful people have been highlighted, Elena Aguilar and Brene Brown. So why does psychological safety matter now more than ever? Because in some ways, people have been working like the image on the left for a while. There's a lot going on. And then on the right, another thing that's happening for a lot of folks, myself included, is that it feels like drinking from a fire hose. I kind of thought that I would stop feeling like I've been drinking from a fire hose, and it turns out that was not the case at all. That there's consistently new things that I need to learn and I need to adapt to. And same thing for our teachers, right? There's all of these platforms. There's communicating with families. There's communicating with students. There's dealing with the Zoom outage that happened just yesterday on the first day of school for many people. Even when you think you have all of your ducks in a row, surprise, global Zoom outage. So this overwhelming feeling is kind of something that a lot of us can identify with, and the number of apps and adjustments that we keep having to make are still very, very relevant. So psychological safety is super important now because of these two pieces. So I wanted to elaborate. I talked about this in the blog a little bit, and I really like these graphics as a way of kind of illustrating low trust and high trust environments. And I know that I've been a part of both, and that they feel different. So in a low trust environment, people will avoid wanting to look ignorant or incompetent or intrusive or negative by not doing things, right? So they won't ask questions. I've definitely sat in that PD as a teacher and been like, I don't know what is going on, but not said anything, and then left and went and found some other teacher and asked them. Incompetent by not admitting weaknesses or mistakes, and this is something that can really start at the top and be modeled. Not offering up ideas and not challenging the status quo. So in a low trust environment, we often see these behaviors playing out at some level or another. On the contrary, and I would love to know your all's thoughts in the chats about these. On the contrary, if there's a high trust environment, and people aren't afraid that they're going to be punished, they're not afraid they're going to be shot down or humiliated, right? You'll see people asking questions, admitting mistakes and weaknesses. And when I say asking questions, I don't think that means asking questions in like a gotcha kind of way, but really asking to clarify or to understand. You'll see folks offering up ideas, especially across that power structure, and challenging the status quo. So that's in more of a high trust environment. So when I think about when I've been in a low trust environment or when I've been in a high trust environment, I can actually remember instances where I did or did not do some of these things, which at the time I didn't realize was because I didn't trust the team that I was with. But now I know that's why. So when we think about trust, three things that we can focus on as leaders are consistency, right? Just like with students, consistency. Context. So anytime that a decision is made, I know that when I was an instructional coach, I would often just kind of be around the office or around the principal's office, just working. I would be in between teachers that I was observing or meeting with, and I would often hear things and be a little bit more privy to more information than the teachers were. In terms of, I would know more of the background context for a decision. So when I would go meet with teachers and they would be frustrated or confused about a decision that was told to them via email in 2 sentences, I could often provide that missing piece of context of, oh, well, actually, I think here's why that decision was made. And that context is a really, really important piece in building trust, because people feel like they're not being, right? Something isn't being passed over their head. They're not afraid of feeling ignorant. They're given the background information so that they understand more about why a decision was made. Even if they don't agree with that decision, you're still providing them with that context. And then vulnerability, back to the wonderful Brene Brown, with sensitivity and strength. And this really needs to be modeled at all levels, including thinking about how we're modeling that for students, right? Admitting that we made a mistake for students doesn't mean that we're weak, right? We're showing that we are reflective and that we're open to growth. And so we can really model that as leaders when working with teachers or when working with teams. So what does that look like? I like this little graphic because it kind of breaks down some different ways that folks at different levels in a school or district organization can build psychological safety, just depending on the context of their role. So teachers, right? A lot of this goes back to building strong relationships with people. You're building connections with students, and that also includes other team members, right? We can check in with team members one-on-one. You can shoot them a text. You could give somebody a call. School leaders and coaches, modeling, making, and learning from mistakes. even just checking in with people, or if someone asks a question, if they take that risk and ask a question, making sure that you circle back with them. And then all the way up to district leaders, and then some things that can be used for everyone, like modeling, making and learning from mistakes, practicing active listening. I was just having a conversation with my partner about this last night, how we're not interacting with a lot of people face to face anymore, and my active listening skills have tanked because I'm not practicing this anymore, right? I'm on Zoom where I can have secretly my email taking up half the screen and be typing on email. And so really practicing that active listening, even if you're in a digital context or if you're, socially distanced from people in a building. So let's pause because oh, the graphic is great. Yeah, I love that graphic. I wish I could say I created it, but I did not. What are some habits that you have already put in place to promote psychological safety? Even something as simple as, oh, I send my team members a text every Monday. Let's share out in the chat, because this is really where we're going to be able to gather some more concrete ideas based on what you all have been doing that has been working. So what are some habits you can put in place to promote psychological safety? And I'm going to get a little song going just to change up the energy a little bit before we shift into the second half of our presentation. Nanette, I really like that idea of kind of monitoring how people their presence on social media, if they're on social media. I saw that a few times where people would just drop off and then they would come back and share a message. Thanks everyone for checking on me. Because something had shifted. And since we can't see people in person as much as we used to, right, we don't have that gauge of reading body language anymore, especially if you're like Megan and I, where we're on Zoom all the time. We can only see this much of a person at a time, and they have those Zoom filters. So it's really hard to pick up on things like body language or how someone is looking. Katie said, create care cafes for teachers to check in around self-care topics. Ooh, that is cool. And bringing in fun. Kimberly says, wellness checks via text and survey. Ooh, trying out new technology to model it's okay to be vulnerable. Ooh, I love that. Ooh, focusing on what you can control. Huge. And a lot of people using social media or some type of group to connect people and build that virtual community, which is really cool to see. I definitely have a few WhatsApp thread chains with 20-something people on them, and they've been really nice. And I used to be overwhelmed by them, but now I'm very grateful for them that I didn't leave. Awesome. So we're going to shift into, we have one last piece for our expand, and then we'll get into some practice for y'all. And I will toss it back to Megan.
Yeah, I think that question about the habits that you have to stay connected, I think leads well into what we're going to be talking about with connectedness. That sense of, I think, the sense of belonging that we talked about at the beginning, and how family became that like big, image in the word cloud. When you have a sense of connectedness, or when anybody has a sense of connectedness, they feel like they know why they're there, and it's important that they're there for the people that they're there for. So I wanted to talk a little bit about rituals more specifically as a strategy for engendering a sense of connectedness in a remote environment. There's this book that I got last year, and I loved it, and I read it, and then everything changed. So the book is called Rituals for Work, and it's a bunch of really very specific, like tactical things that you can do at work to create engagement and shared purpose. And I pulled this quote from this book. Rituals are a really powerful strategy to improve work life. Rituals are something that as human beings, we just do. We do them in every like facet of our life because it helps us work through a lot of things. So The importance of rituals at work. Rituals can help us act more like we aspire to be. They're practices that bond people together, help us move through conflicts, amp us up to better performances, and assist us in adapting to change. And one of the things that I just wanted to call out is a difference between a ritual and just a practice of, like, you know, oh, I check in, I send text to people to check in on them. A ritual is something that everybody knows is coming. Like, it's something that becomes, it becomes something that is understood to be the way you interact. And if anybody would care to share in the chat, like rituals that you have as part of like your family life, or as something that you used to do with school teams when you were in person, I'd be very curious to see how you have employed rituals for connection. But I'll let you go ahead and decide if you want to share or not, and I'll keep going on to talk about some of the rituals that we highlighted in the blog post and we wanted to talk about on the webinar. The first is a check-in. You noticed when we started this webinar, we did a check-in with the Mentimeter where you were asked to state your, like, the words that you connect with the word belonging. That is something that we do at Education Elements in every meeting we're a part of. Every meeting that I have with anybody at Education Elements starts with a check-in question. And at first, when you're doing it, it feels a little stilted and it feels like, what? Oh, I have to talk now? But it's done with a purpose. The purpose for a check-in question is you want to hear everybody's voice at the very beginning, because even if it doesn't feel like it's that important that you shared that family is the thing that you associate with belonging, you became a co-creator in the experience once you participated in the check-in. It builds trust and connectedness. We understand a little bit more about where you're coming from, even though we can't see you, we just see you as names in the chat. We understand you a little bit better because of what we read in your check-in question. And it also builds a space for you to be responsive to the current moment. You can tailor your check-in question to something that has happened recently or something that you know is coming up. And you can solicit input from people. And there is the expectation that their input is valued if you've made a practice of a check-in question, which is what brings us to the strategies for employing check-in questions. You want to be consistent. It has to be something that people expect to hear coming. So it may be that if you're not used to doing check-in questions in a meeting, in our experience working with district teams, lots of times we'll have, like, you know, the curriculum team that works with teachers who are like, oh yeah, check-in questions. This is just like morning meetings, so it's no problem, we can do this. And then you'll have the facilities team working with the people who don't usually do check-in questions. And so they have to be really deliberate about the type of questions that they're going to ask when they start the practice. So maybe a safe first check-in question might be, what's your energy level coming into this meeting on a scale of 1 to 5? 1 being very low energy, 5 being very high energy. I'll go first, I'm a 4. And then you just let everybody check in at that level. You want to tailor your question to your audience and to the level of psychological safety that exists with that group. And then get creative. Once you've built a little safety with the group, we have had some really fun check-in questions come up on our internal teams and also on the external teams that we've been able to build that kind of psychological safety with. It can be a great lighthearted opportunity to connect before a meeting starts. And if you're doing it remotely, you can use tools like Mentimeter. We've had things where people draw pictures of each other and then hold up the pictures. So you can get creative with the types of things that you check in on. Yeah, I'm just noticing objects near you. We've got something where it's like, you know, pick something that means something that's on your desk, and then you just pick it up and tell people what it means. So it's a great, great ritual for connection at the beginning of a meeting. And we would love it if you would try it and then let us know how it goes. This one I really liked. This is really tactical. And it has to do with being deliberate about how you're using the fact that we have a visual medium in video conferencing technology, and making sure we can use that to our advantage for building connection. Because it definitely, we know the downsides, we know it makes us really tired to be on Zoom all day, but there is an upside in that we can connect with each other visually in a way we couldn't if we were just on the phone. So let's use it. People subconsciously create connection when they're in person. Like if I'm in person with Maria and I'm telling her a joke and I'm cracking up at my joke before I get to the punchline, she's going to anticipate that and she's going to see me laughing and she's going to smile in encouragement and we're going to mirror each other. And that's going to be a connection before we even share a laugh. And we do that in a million different ways without even thinking about it with people that we are actually in physical interaction with. Like if it's a handshake, if it's a high five, all of those familiar gestures of physical connection, we can't access now. So we want to be thinking about how we can do that. How can we build that into this virtual experience? And create opportunities. We want to be able to create opportunities for that kind of subconscious mirroring in an online setting. So our next slide, I love this. This is one of my regular team meetings. And we would start this meeting at the beginning with, it would be like shout outs and achievements. And it didn't even have to be anybody in the meeting. We could just say something that we admired that somebody else had done. And as soon as you say your thing, the rest of the group raised the roof. And it was really funny to see everybody on our little grid doing the same thing at the same time. And we're all going, okay, no, I'm going to flatten my palms and do it. And it was a great sense of connection. And it set us all on in a frame of mind that got us really interested in working together and constructive for the meeting and feeling very connected. So I encourage any physical gestures of synchronicity. And the final tactic here goes along with that sort of protecting community time. We won't likely have anything resembling what we're used to as a teacher's lounge or like that casual workspace where you can go and exhale when you've got a break and share a story or show somebody something funny. We've lost that space. And if we have that space, we probably can't be physically close enough to enjoy it in the way that we used to. So having some sort of channel, whether it's like WhatsApp or we use Slack, or there's all sorts of different channels you could use. I think in Google Classroom, you could even create a classroom like this, but I might be speaking out of turn there. But there's technology you can use to create this space with your teams. And we have one. So our teams were all, we work together in project teams. So we often travel together. So we had that chance of being together to build our relationships. When we stopped traveling, we transferred a channel that we had in Slack that was weird travel stuff, where we would send pictures of funny things we saw on the road, or, you know, bad hotel art or anything like that. And we transitioned it to weird work from home stuff. So we'll have days where we post pictures of, you know, our pets. We'll have days that maybe we'll have different themes of things that are happening. Sometimes it's like, what are you making for lunch? And we'll send pictures of set tables and connect that way. So building in those sort of the space for those cultural connections. We've got one colleague who makes a Spotify playlist every week and shares it out with everybody so that we can all listen to the same music and connect over music, even though we're not together. So building those opportunities for connection through music, food, chat, in a virtual channel can do a lot to foster a sense of connectedness in a remote environment. So we have some ideas for you. We're transitioning into our practice time, which is just about the right time. So this is a resource that we wanted to share. We built this resource back in the spring. I think it was around Teacher Appreciation Week. And we thought it might be helpful to share out some tips and strategies for virtual teacher appreciation. So that, we call it a one-pager. It's 2 sides, but technically one piece of paper if you print it out. And that is linked at that bit.ly address. So it is case sensitive if you want to type that in and have access to it. We'll also be sharing out this deck, so you won't lose this after the webinar.
And it's in the chat as well.
Oh, great. Thank you. And then we made a little planning sheet for you if you care to organize your thoughts like this. We included categories for creating a sense of resiliency, trust, and connection, any tactic you may want to try that you learned about here, who it's going to help, and when you can start. So just get your thoughts organized around the things that you saw on this webinar, and let us know what you try and how it goes, and if we can send you any other resources to be helpful.
And I just dropped the link to the planning tool in the chat as well. So you can access that. It's also available at that bit.ly link. Oops, not that bit.ly link, this bit.ly link that you see on the screen. Megan, do we want to give people like 5 minutes to dig in and then we can close out?
Sure.
Awesome. So I'm going to play a little bit of wordless music for 5 minutes. Both of those links are in the chat. So if you want to explore either one, or you could use this time to start planning, we'll pull you back in about 5 minutes and we will close out. All right. So to close this out with our apply, we would love it if you all wouldn't mind sharing one thing that you would like to try as a result of something that we talked about or something that someone else shared in the chat. If you wouldn't mind dropping something you would like to try in the chat. All right. Yes, material and slides will be on the website tomorrow and also emailed out to you. So you'll have everything. There's a lot of stuff linked in there. Yes, Mentimeter. Woo! My favorite check-in tool. And a few last things before we send you on your way to have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday. We do have a lot of other resources available on our website, edelements.com. You'll see the link to all of this stuff as soon as you go to that website. You don't have to worry about the back half. Edelements.com. And then we also have, we were talking about virtual community earlier, a Facebook group that if you are on Facebook, you are encouraged and more than welcome to join. It's called Lifted. If you search for it, you will find it. You just have to type that into the search bar. And this is teachers from, I believe, across the world, teachers and administrators. We started this earlier, I think in 2019. And it has continued to grow since then. So if you are looking for a place to connect virtually with other people, to share and continue to gather ideas, this is a great spot. And with that, thank you all so much. If you have questions or anything, you can always contact me or Megan. And thank you all again for taking the time to join us. I'll play some Dolly as y'all log out, but hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Thanks again so much.